Just how the heck did I have an episode on May 13th and I failed to mention it was 513 Day? What is wrong with me? Anyway, my new task? Let's build a community. Welcome to the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. The podcast talking local Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio area sports. Listen on your favorite podcast platforms by visiting cindaypod.com. That's CINDAYPOD.com. Intro theme is Overdrive by Matrika from Uppbeat.io. Here's your host, Lee W. Mowen. So this is going to be a little different of an episode because normally I talk about local sports, and I want to talk about the voices of local sports and building a local sports community with this podcast. You know, I'm fairly certain that my qualms against local sports radio have been well noted by now. And in fact, a little news for you, Wings Nielsen ratings went down even further. Now they're at 0.4. I will have to give my friend Shay Neal, a plug. He's doing a Reds talk show Thursday evenings at 6, and I'm going to listen in to one of those one day. But I just wanted to say that this podcast needs more voices. You know what I mean? I'm sure that, my ratings have dropped on this podcast because it's just me, and, a lot of people don't like me, but that's okay. I don't like a lot of people either. So my whole goal on building a community is to get local sports fans to talk about their sports team. Because, there's a lot of local sports and, I don't have the time anymore to cover it because I'm raising a family and, don't get me wrong. This podcast isn't going anywhere. I'm still doing it, but I always feel bad when there's something that happens and I can't just turn around and get to it quickly enough. You know what I mean? So this is where I ask you, the fans, to consider, sending me in some voice clips of you covering your favorite teams. I know, for example, the Five Rivers Faithful, they're a group of soccer fanatics that want to see their local teams do well here in Dayton. And there's several that have been on this podcast, like Brian Reese, Chad Hollingsworth, I believe, is on there. I mean, there's a lot of great people in this group. And I follow their conversation on Slack, being part of the group, and I really like what they're doing. They cover all the soccer teams in the Dayton area, which is the Dayton Dutch Lions, FC Dayton, and they talk about a whole bunch of other things going on. So this is where I extend a microphone to you, the voice of the local sports team, to, send in your clips. So basically what would happen is you would record yourself talking about your favorite teams. It could be one, it could be many. And then you send that clip to me. I put it in a podcast episode. I give you all the credit. I plug you on social media and bam. I wish I could pay you, but you think I'd make money off this podcast? I don't. In fact, the whole point of this podcast was to eventually find a job to make money. You know what I mean? Like with sports radio and everything. So why is this so important to me? Well, like I said, local sports radio, I think, is lackluster at best. I do have a good friend that's, having a Reds talk show, which is great. And Shay, I will listen to you on the radio, I promise. But everything else is kind of meh. 980 doesn't have local sports talk. It's all Fox Sports and Wing. Well, they're talking about, the next time a Buckeye goes to the bathroom, or they're talking about, that team in Columbus, and it's that team in Columbus, and the Cleveland Browns are going to win the Super Bowl because the quarterback they signed now has his 23rd sexual assault case against him. Yeah. Yeah, I can't believe that. That's 23. Good Lord. Anyway, enough about that. I want it to be where this podcast is for everyone in the area. I want to kind of help establish not like a train, but a link of all the local sports faithfuls. There's the hockey faithful, there's the soccer faithful, football. There's a lot of great fans in this town. And it's a shame that if you think about it, sports radio isn't interested in Dayton, which is a shame. But this is where you come in and, you talk about it. And, I think this is something that I've always wanted to have happen. And it did happen, 2 years ago? Chris Tilton, who is a previous guest on this podcast, he sent in his recap of the National Trailblazers playoff game. And, of course, I didn't get to it until the next week after the Blazers lost. Way to go, me. But my whole thing is this podcast isn't just me telling you about local sports. This is local sports and celebrating what they do here because, they need, people to follow them. They need people to root them on. They need something to cheer for, because, Dayton Flyers basketball only happens in the winter and a little bit in the fall for, preparing the schedule and the roster and everything. College basketball has its shelf life, but Dayton's more than college basketball. Baseball's got shelf life. Pretty much from spring onwards to October, November, such. Baseball's done. Football is August till February. You get what I'm saying? Sports never dies. Ball don't lie. Sports keep happening. And that's especially true in the Dayton area. And you know what? I'm extending, fans in Cincinnati, fans in Dayton, because Cincinnati's got a pretty decent sports talk scene. And there's a lot of great, passionate fans following the Reds, even though, they were the worst team at one point. Not any longer. I don't know why I did that laugh, but yeah. But you know what? This offer goes to any sports fan in the Cincinnati-Dayton area. You follow the Reds, you follow the Bearcats, you follow Xavier, you follow any team. If I haven't been able to cover it as much as I like to, send in some clips to talk about it. Just a few minutes on the clips is all, and make sure you have decent audio quality. If it sounds like then fix that, please. So decent audio quality, a few minutes, doesn't have to be a whole big chapter on things. If you want to, then that's fine. And I would probably change up the box art, as I call it. I would take off my name because you know what, it's not just me. It's a community. I probably put, community episode, something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought of all the details yet, but pretty much I might run this podcast. I might be the main voice you hear on this podcast, but that doesn't mean that I'm the only one that's covering local sports. In fact, that's not true. There's a lot of great people out there that follow their team, and I want to hear what they think about their squad. I think this is going to be a great thing. And hopefully this catches on. If not, then, stuff goes on. I continue my podcast and I prove why this podcast is better than Dayton Sports Radio. Anything's greater than zero, but, take what you can get. So if you're interested, figure out a way how to send files to me somehow. I'm sure I have Dropbox, Google. That's how I've been sending the clips over to WWSU when they've played over the radio, which I need to do that again. Just thinking about that. So find a way to send me audio clips and I'll play them. I'll give you full credits. And if I can, I'll plug you on social media just because that's what you deserve. And like I said, I wish I could pay you. I do have a few podcast stickers still lying around. So if you want one of those, I can, mail them to you. That's fine. But I can't pay. So there you go. So pretty much, one more thing. No Ohio State talk. That's what Wing's for. And that's what every media outlet in town thinks. Oh, hey, they're playing. I don't care about that team in Columbus. Friends don't let friends root for that team in Columbus. Should make that a sticker, but who would buy it? Answer, me. I just put it all over my car because that's how I roll. So, Crew, Clippers, that's fine. Blue Jackets, that's fine. Champion City Kings, well, I'm going to be talking about the Kings mostly. And in fact, that will get into my new project coming up. We'll talk about that in a moment, but not right now. Dutch Lions, FC Dayton, the Cincinnati Sirens. I know there's a few more Cincinnati teams. Kings Hammer. I almost said Cincinnati Dutch Lions, and it's still tough to see them gone. But hey, as long as Kings Hammer keeps up the good work they've been doing in Cincinnati, that's all I can ask for. FC Cincinnati, of course. I mentioned the Crew already. Baseball, Dragons, Reds, because I know there's a lot of passionate Reds fans out there. I know there's a lot of passionate Dragons fans out there too that love the team and adore the team, especially since this is a Dragons team that just picked up their 31st win and one of the highest winning percentages in minor league baseball. At the time I shared a graphic on my Facebook, 4th best. That's not in Ohio. That's across the country. And I think either the first or second highest winning percentage in high A, because there's 3 leagues in high A, counting the Midwest League. So let's build community. So there you go. Just send me audio clips of you talking about your favorite team, and I'll give you credit. So there we go. Community. Let's build it. And in fact, I love my box art that I made for this episode. Like, local sports. And everyone's just happy. It's public domain. So there you go. No copyrights against me. Not like I could afford to pay them anyway, but there you go. So let's move on and talk about one of my new projects I am going to be running over the summer, King Me, the Champion City Kings podcast. And pretty soon it'll be available on all major platforms. Right now it's just on my website until I can get it up on the team website. And pretty much it's just going to be a weekly podcast talking about Champion City Kings. So hopefully you'll join me for that. This podcast isn't going anywhere. So yes, I know now I'm balancing 2 audio podcasts. Like I could really balance this one. Well, how long have I been gone? Let's check the calendar. At least 2 weeks. I said at least 2 weeks. Come on. 2 weeks gone. 2.5 weeks. Okay. So there you go. That's something to be excited for. So yeah, 2 podcast episodes, all the Kings home games this year on PLTV. And some games I'm the Dragons announcer, some games I'm the Dragons scoreboard, more games than not scoreboard. But hey, I'm still an announcer for a minor league team, so woo. At least most people were pretty happy for me, except that one guy is like, well, if you're this guy, you're announcing major league players. Like, dude, go away. You're not as great as you think you are, but there you go. So that's my new project. You can check it out on my personal website, theleewmountain.com. But again, this episode, short, sweet, to the point. I want to build a community, and you have the opportunity to be a part of this podcast. So please consider it. If not, that's okay. This podcast rolls on, and this podcast proves that, hey, there is someone talking about local sports. You just can't find it on Dayton Sports Radio. That will do it for this short episode. Hopefully next time we'll talk about the soccer teams because, yes, soccer is in full bloom here. Spring pun. That's funny. The Crew, FC Cincinnati looking sharp. Well, sharper than previous years, but I think Coach Pat Noonan is on his way to building a great program. So we'll see, how that goes. Tough loss at Montreal, but hey, it's about how you bounce back. So FC Cincinnati, Dayton Dutch Lions, FC Dayton Women's Club, Cincinnati Sirens, and Kings Hammer. We'll talk about those hopefully next time for the soccer episode. Baseball, Reds are no longer the worst team in major leagues. I know I mentioned that already, but hey, that's something to hang your hat on. In fact, last night beating Boston in Boston for the first time since the 1975 World Series. So it's been close to 50 years, 47 years. But then again, what the radio broadcast wasn't telling you is the Reds and the Red Sox really haven't played that much. I think it's like 4 times in the past few years. I think the Reds did get a win in Cincinnati, but that's not the point. But there you go. We'll talk baseball. We'll keep it going, and hopefully I will resume guest episodes. Yes, hopefully I'll get some people on and we'll talk about them and get that piping up, because the last one technically was Tony and Seth in the 2021-22 boys basketball season preview. But before that, I think the last one was 2020. So yeah, it's been a while. So let's change that. So that will do it for the episode. Talking about community and building a community. Hopefully you'll decide that it's worth joining and being plugged and getting your name out there along with this podcast. And we'll see how far this can grow. I'm Lee W. Mowen, and thank you for listening to the local Sunday Sports Podcast. Remember, local sports, it's not on Dayton Sports Radio anymore. It's here on the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. Talk to you again next time. Thank you for listening to the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. Be sure to bookmark CindayPod.com, spelled CINDAYPOD, the official website of the podcast. You can find your favorite ways of listening to the local Sunday Sports Podcast, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, the iHeartRadio app, and many more. You can also purchase merchandise from TeePublic and Redbubble to help support the podcast. Follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CindayPod, and the host at the Lee W. Mowen. The closing theme is Cosmopolitan from Pecan Pie on Uppbeat. This is Lee W. Mowen signing off another episode of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. Thank you for your continued listenership, and join me on the next episode.